You jolt awake. The room is dark, the mental fog is thick, and within seconds you're reaching for a screen and rushing to pour that first cup of coffee. There is a low, constant hum of tension sitting just beneath the surface. This internal pressure reflects a nervous system operating in conditions it was never designed for. When modern inputs exceed your biological limits for too long, your brain enters a protective mode, becoming more alert, growing more sensitive, and far less flexible. To understand why, we have to look at cortisol. We usually label cortisol as a toxic stress hormone, but it is actually a vital energy chemical. Its release is strictly controlled by a tiny cluster of about 20,000 nerves in your brain called the suprachiasmatic nucleus, or SCN. This is your biological master clock. Under natural conditions, this clock uses morning daylight entering your eyes as a cue. That light signals the SCN to trigger a healthy, robust surge of cortisol, flooding your system with the exact chemical cocktail you need for peak physical alertness and mental focus to start the day. Our biological waking system is remarkably precise, but modern routines, waking up in the dark, scrolling through immediate stressors, and relying on stimulants, hijack this natural baseline. We force the engine to start artificially, setting the stage for a day-long physiological roller coaster. By the time you start working, your nervous system is already carrying a load. Then come the microstressors: traffic jams, a crowded inbox, rapid-fire decisions. Your brain interprets every single one of these modern inconveniences as a physical threat, triggering abnormal, repetitive spikes of cortisol and adrenaline. To fuel a perceived fight-or-flight situation, excess cortisol forces your liver to dump glucose into your bloodstream. Blood sugar rockets upward, but without physical exertion, your body overcorrects and blood sugar crashes. This rapid drop triggers ghrelin, driving intense, uncontrollable cravings for sugary foods. Pushing your biology through this extreme chemical cycle requires massive amounts of energy. It severely taxes your mitochondria, the microscopic power plants inside your cells, and places an exhausting burden on your entire adrenal system. Eventually, the system runs out of reserves. You hit the mid-afternoon crash. A heavy mental fog rolls in, your patience strains, and simply transitioning from one task to another suddenly feels like moving through wet concrete. This afternoon crash marks the point where your body loses its metabolic flexibility. Your energy fails because your system can no longer efficiently switch between fuel sources after a morning of erratic chemical spikes and blood sugar volatility. As evening approaches, your biology expects relief. Your internal clock is programmed so that as the sun sets and the environment darkens, your cortisol levels should naturally plummet, signaling the end of the day's active phase. Your brain's pineal gland acts like a seesaw with cortisol, requiring its absence to release sleep-inducing melatonin. But artificial light and psychological stress trick your brain into thinking the sun is up. Cortisol remains high long after dark, physically blocking melatonin from rising. This chemical traffic jam creates a very specific psychological toll. You enter the late evening feeling tired and wired. Your physical body is completely exhausted, yet your mind feels divided, hyper-alert, and overstimulated. By continuously overriding our biological sunset, we deny the brain access to internal recovery. We trap the body in a state of high-alert conservation, burning energy we no longer have. This state of alert conservation follows you into the dark. Even when you finally manage to drift off, lingering cortisol in your bloodstream prevents your brain from sinking into the deepest, most restorative stages of sleep. You stay hovering in lighter sleep cycles. Without deep sleep, your immune system cannot function properly. Your body is left unable to repair damaged tissues, consolidate the day's memories, or flush out the toxic cellular waste that naturally builds up in your brain during waking hours. This disrupted rhythm is also the biological culprit behind that frustrating 3 a.m. wake-up. Because your circadian clock is misaligned, your body experiences an abnormally early spike in cortisol. That chemical surge pulls your brain prematurely out of sleep, leaving you staring at the ceiling in a state of anxious wakefulness. When this internal clock remains fractured, blood pressure fails to drop during sleep as it should, increasing the risk of cardiovascular disease by nearly 50%. Your brain, forced to conserve energy, narrows its emotional range, leaving you feeling reactive and flat because the bandwidth for resilience has quite literally run out. We cannot eliminate the demands of modern life, but the human nervous system is highly plastic. Aligning your biological rhythms requires the deliberate practice of recovery, a process of signaling to your master clock that the body can safely return to a regulated state. The first step happens the moment you wake up. Exposing your eyes to natural daylight within the first few minutes of the morning firmly anchors your master clock. That single burst of light regulates your morning energy and automatically sets the timer for your evening melatonin release. Second, establish a strict caffeine cutoff in the early afternoon. Caffeine can linger in your receptors for hours. Removing it early ensures you aren't fighting artificial chemical interference when your body naturally attempts its evening wind-down phase. Finally, utilize active recovery techniques. Controlled breathing exercises or a brief yoga practice physically force the brain to downshift. These actions deliberately activate the parasympathetic nervous system, signaling to your body that the threat has passed and it is safe to recover. Your body is always listening to the cues you give it. By intentionally aligning your daily habits with your evolutionary biological clock, you can clear the mental fog, restore your emotional resilience, and finally return to a grounded, steady state.